guys, it's Isabella Illustrations here. Welcome to a new video. So, today's video is going to be a mid-year book kind of wrap-up kind of thing, where I'm just going to go over the books that I have read so far in 2024. So, let's get to it. Alright, so I have my Goodreads reading challenge open on my iPad. I wanted to read 10 books this year. I've read 16, which I'm very happy about. Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but I see these booktubers always bragging about how they're reading like 9 books a month, and I'm just like overwhelmed by that. I'm just like, that's not realistic. I prefer taking my time with books and actually enjoying them than reading just to say, oh, I read 15 books this month. Like, no. I read to enjoy myself, take my time with it, have fun. That. I don't want it to feel like tedious, which I fear it could become if you read that many books. But anyway, let's get to the first book I read. So the first book that I read this year was The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. Now, I love this tale. I've watched movies, I've watched the show, but I wanted to actually read the actual book. And this was amazing. I almost read it in one sitting. The reason I didn't was because I wanted to watch something with my mom that night. But if not, I would have read this the whole, like, one sitting through. It was that amazing. I had so much fun. After I gave it 5 stars on my Goodreads, in my review I wrote, this was such a whimsical story in terms of the writing style. I loved Irving's writing and the narrator of this tale so much that it kept me reading till the very end. The story was fun, entertaining, and spooky, and I absolutely loved it. So I would definitely read this again, and I highly recommend it. Alright, so the next book I read, I borrowed from the library, so I don't have a physical copy, but it is How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories. So this is an anthology set in the Cruel Prince universe, and I gave this a 4-star. I absolutely loved it. I would recommend it for any Cruel Prince fan. This anthology was so nicely illustrated, and I loved seeing things from Cardan's perspective, and it was just really great. In my review, I wrote, this was such a fun book to read with different stories about Cardan and his perspective, which was really interesting to read, had a blast. We got some great character background in here. The illustrations are also superb. Highly recommend for any fan of the Folk of the Air trilogy. This is a must read. So that's from my review on Goodreads. And yeah. Okay, so the next book that I read was All Is Found, which was the Frozen 10th anniversary anthology book. And it's very thick. There's like 10 stories in here, I think. And they take place at different points in the Frozen timeline. And I liked seeing our characters again and having more stories to read. But I did give this a 3.5 because it wasn't like, not all the stories were as interesting as some of the other ones, so that some of them were a bit difficult to get through for me, but I think every Frozen fan should read this. And my review on Goodreads was, this was a cute read. These stories were definitely written for younger people in mind, which is why some of the plots were a bit dull, but anyway, they added to the world of Frozen, so as long as we're doing that, I don't care. I will read the book. Any diehard Frozen fan should read this just for the extra content set at different periods of the Frozen timeline. So the next 2 things that I read were comic books. So I don't have these physically, but for those of you who don't know, I'm a big fan of the Sean Murphy Batman comics. And it's called the Murphyverse, basically. So I read the new one, Batman Beyond the White Knight, which I loved. It had some characters from Batman Beyond, which I did really, I like that show. I gave this a 4-star, and what I wrote was, this was a fun comic quick to read and a good addition to the series. I enjoyed seeing the aspects of Batman Beyond being implemented in here. I also enjoyed seeing Harley and the Joker's twins grown up, which, if you've read the rest of the series, you would know. Anyway, probably a spoiler. As well as the strained relationships between characters being resolved, the Murphyverse continues to be so much fun. I sound like a reviewer. Anyway, then there was the second comic in that series, which was Batman White Knight Presents Generation Joker, which was with the Joker's twins. This one I also gave 4 stars, and I wrote, another thrilling and emotional ride. This comic was really entertaining, and I enjoyed having a comic focused on the Joker's children. It was sweet and heartfelt, and I loved it. So, yeah. Okay, actually I gave this one 4.5 stars. Okay, I did not read that right. Yeah, anyway, those were the comics, and the only comics I've read so far this year. Okay, so the next book I read is an adult book, and that is the first book in the Never After series by Emily McIntyre. Now, these books in the series are based off of different, like, tales. Like, this one's Peter Pan, but it's, like, completely changed the story. It's a modern day romance between Hook and Wendy, but, like, as I said, the story is completely different. These stories are basically if, like, the villain gets the girl, which I kind of like, so that's why I picked these, like, this one up and another one, which I'll show later. But yeah, all the characters' names are the same. It's just the story is completely changed and the backgrounds of characters and their backstories are completely different. I wrote in my review that I enjoyed this book quite a bit. Take the characters from Peter Pan and make an original story with references to the original, so there are references. This romance was wholesome for the most part. It totally went where I wasn't expecting in a good way, so. Yeah, if you like darker stories and villains getting the girl, read this. The next thing I read was for school, and this was a digital book, so I don't have it. The Tragical History of Dr. Faustus. Now, this one I gave a 3.5. I wasn't a big fan of this. This was written in like a play format, so I didn't really enjoy it that much. In my review, I wrote 3.5. Not a big fan of reading plays, but I read this for school, and I can see why this play is seen as a way for the author to criticize subjects in his time without being persecuted, basically. Overall, the questions it poses were interesting, but the story itself was not very entertaining, which, yeah, it's very short, and yeah, I recommend reading it for school, but besides that, I don't think you should read this for like a pleasure read, really. So that's just my opinion. The next book that I read, I also borrowed from the library, so I don't have a physical copy, and that's The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. This was the only book in the Grishaverse I had not read, so I wanted to read this desperately, and when I saw the library had it, since I didn't want to buy it, I had to pick it up. And I gave this a 4-star. I really had a blast. I didn't think I would enjoy this one because it's an anthology, but it has nothing to do mostly with the characters that we know from Shadow and Bone. It's basically a bunch of like different like kind of fairy tales set in the Grishaverse kind of thing. And they're kind of, some of them are kind of like retellings of fairy tales that we have in our world, like the Nutcracker, which I found was a really interesting take. So yeah, gave this 4 stars, and I wrote in my review, I was kind of hesitant to read this book at first because it was an anthology that had nothing to do with the characters we know and love from the Grishaverse, but I am so glad I read this because it is truly entertaining and had me gasping, especially the last story. One of the Shadow and Bone characters does appear, so I will not spoil who, but I had lots of fun reading this. Next book I read, this one was also for school, and this is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I've always been hesitant to read this book. Then I read it in class and it became one of my favorite classics. It's so much better than the movies. The movies don't do this book any justice. I highly recommend reading the book and taking what you can from this instead of what you know from the movies. Because the movies, no. No. I gave this a 4.5. And I don't give anything 4.5 stars unless it's really entertaining me. And it also has this really interesting writing format and, the, messages that it's conveying, amazing. I wrote in my review, this book was so good. I didn't think it would be, but it was. The characters were complex and compelling. The descriptions of nature were vivid. I highly recommend you read the book. The movies haven't done it or the creature justice at all. So, please read this book. The next one I read for school, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, I saw this twist coming because I've seen this story done and adapted, and it's pretty much the same, I would say. From what I remember. I haven't watched it in a long time, but yeah, we read this for class. I gave it a 4-star. It wasn't that amazing, but it wasn't shitty either. What I wrote down was, I gave this book this rating because it deserves it, even though I've had the twist spoiled for me by many. So it's that Jekyll and Hyde are the same person. So it's that kind of twist. If I hadn't known that ahead of time, I would have rated it a bit higher. That's my fault. But yeah. But for people who didn't know, it would have been shocking, and for that and the characters and themes, I believed it earns this rating. So that's my opinion. Yeah. Okay, so next I read another book in Emily McIntyre's Never After novel series, and that is Twisted. This one is longer. This is an Aladdin kind of story. Yeah, so Jasmine and Jafar end up together, which I don't know what it is about these villain and heroine pairings, but as you get older, you kind of find the villains kind of attractive. I don't know what it is about that. But anyway, I love this book more than Hooked. I think that this was a really great book. I had so much fun reading it, and I gave it a 4-star. This was just so good. I had so much fun. So I wrote in my review, I had fun with this novel. Loved the Easter eggs from the original story again. The characters had quite a bit of depth, and the slow burn was great, which I normally don't like. You have to do slow burn a certain way, otherwise I won't enjoy it. This did it for me. So much angst, I ate it up. What you see is what you get. And I enjoyed it because of that. So, I recommend this. The next book I read was the second book in the Crowns series by Nicola Tyke, and that is Shadow Queen. Now, these books are each almost 600 pages long, but they're so entertaining that you never get bored. And that's why I gave this book, the first one, 5 stars. These fantasy books are just really great. I love them. I'm on the 3rd book, and yeah, I wrote in my review, another great book in this trilogy. Never a dull moment with these characters. The characters are great to follow, which the characters are great. It kind of remind me of how I fell in love with the characters of Shadow and Bone. That's how it's happening in this book for me. The story is constantly entertaining, and overall a great fantasy novel/series so far. I will definitely be reading the 3rd book. Highly recommend. So, yeah, don't be overwhelmed by the page count. I was a bit at first, but totally worth a check out. I love this series. It's another kind of the villain at the beginning gets the girl, but then he isn't the villain as much anymore, but they're still really cute together, and I highly recommend it. It's a really fun world. Alright, Next was another classic, Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. Now, I saw this at one of my bookstores, and I'd never see it. So I saw it, and as soon as I did, I had to pick it up. I love Peter Pan. I've watched so many of the adaptations, it's not even funny. So I really wanted to read the book and see what the differences were like. And I gave this 4 stars. To be fair, I probably should have given it like maybe a little less. Because, well, maybe not. The majority of the story was the same, but I will just show you guys my review. So 4-star, a very fantastical read. Writing back in the old days was so whimsical and enjoyable to read. So another book where the author's writing style is just so fun to read. So that kept me reading even though it felt a bit boring because I already know the majority of the story. But anyway, the story is pretty much like the adaptations except for a few things. Overall, a fun read. Childhood is so precious, which is something I think Peter Pan definitely teaches you. So yeah, I had a fun time. Yeah, really cute story. Definitely recommend reading at least once. The next book I read was the first book in the Disney's Twisted Tales series, and that is A Whole New World, which is basically like, what if Jafar got the lamp? So, yeah, this was fun. I gave it a 4-star. Liz Braswell, her writing, I like her writing a lot. I think her style is really good. I had so much fun reading this. So in my review I wrote, a really good twisted tale. I had a lot of fun reading it and would definitely recommend. It went in directions I didn't see coming and some that I did, but were enjoyable to read all the same. If you like Aladdin, you'll like this. So, yeah. If you love Disney, pick some of these up. If the premises interest you, go and pick them up. They're very fun, and I like them. I think they're really good. They go into certain topics that are a bit more for, like, teenagers, older teenagers a little bit, but it's not like anything adult. But I like how it goes a bit deeper into certain things that the movie doesn't really address completely. Anyway, I think it's a really good book. Highly recommend. The next book that I read, which I don't have with me because I brought from the library, was Rapunzel and the Lost Lagoon. This takes place before the Before Ever After movie for Disney Channel, and also before the first episode / after the Before Ever After special. And I really enjoyed this. I gave it a 4-star. This was definitely a book I enjoyed reading. The friendship between Cass and Raps is special, and I love getting to see it evolve from the beginning, which is something we don't see in the show, is how they met in the first place. This was entertaining from start to finish. Would recommend to fans of Tangled the series. I had a blast with this. It was better than I thought it was going to be, especially for a middle grade book. I liked it. And then the last book I read is A Dowry of Blood, which is definitely adult, I would say. And yeah, it's basically like a Dracula story, but about his first bride, and then like follows when he gets a second bride and a third one, and then we see how they get out of their dangerous predicament with him. Anyway, I gave this 4 stars. And for my review, I wrote, besides the last chapter not being necessary, I enjoyed this book. The last chapter I didn't really care for. The polyamory was done well, and as a person who doesn't really go for that, that's saying something, because I don't like that stuff really. Great message about controlling relationships and how it's possible to move on and thrive. Overall, an enjoyable read. So it's a vampire book. I picked it up because I was in the mood for a vampire book and a Dracula book, so if that stuff interests you, go ahead and read it. Alright, guys, so those are all the books that I have read so far in 2024. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe so I know to make more book videos whenever I have ideas. And what I'm currently reading is another Twisted Tale series book by Liz Braswell, and that's As Old as Time. And this is basically What If Belle's Mother Cursed the Beast, which I find is the most exciting premise of them all. So I'll let you guys know what I think about this probably at the end of the year. Or if you guys want a video on that, let me know. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye-bye!